Welcome to Small Spark Theory. This podcast is designed as a collection of thoughts, ideas, and practical tips on using marginal gains to help your agency new business endeavours. Small Spark Theory is created and hosted by me, Lucy Mann of Gunpowder Consulting. Hello and welcome back to Small Spark Theory. You'll be pleased to hear I've continued with my stalking of new guests, and just in time for those of you that are thinking about the year ahead, looking at your new business and your marketing plans and trying to look at how you can improve your performance. We've got a very special episode this time talking about awards. Now, some of you may remember back in our episode with Tony Walford, actually, when we were talking about scaling your agency for exit. One of the things that Tony mentioned that comes up when acquirers are looking to evaluate an agency, he said don't overlook awards, which was an interesting thought because we'd thought of awards in lots of other contexts and how they might be useful, but how sometimes acquirers can actually think of them as a measure of an agency was an interesting thought. So I'm delighted to have with me in the pod today marketing and awards specialist Stef Brown. Welcome, Stef.
Thank you very much, Lucy.
I'm really, really pleased to have you here because I follow you on social media and I know that you've worked with lots of agencies. You've worked with some of my clients over the years to help them produce amazing award entries.
Thank you. Yes.
Or winning award entries, which is the key.
Yes.
If we're going to enter awards, we want to win them.
Yes.
And as it does make up a part of an agency's marketing plan, being able to make marginal gains there is really important. So I would love to find out for our listeners, for those that haven't come across you before, tell us a bit about your background and how you came to be this awards specialist.
Okay. Well, I don't think anybody teaches anyone how to become an awards specialist. So
I don't think they do.
I fell into this world mostly by mistake. My first career was as a professional dancer and stage manager.
Oh, right.
In Canada, as you can tell by my accent. And when I came over to the UK in the early 90s, I was still dancing and doing stage management. And after a few years of that, I kind of got sick of being a starving artist and knew that it was time to move on to the next thing. I had no idea what that next thing was. However, there were two things that existed. The first was that I actually lived in Islington at the time, which was right near Clerkenwell, which was the bed of all the creative agencies in London. And I only knew how to use Apple Macs.
Right. So you were in the right place.
So I went to my local recruitment consultancy just down the road and I said to them, I don't know what I want to do, but if you have any entry-level positions in a creative company, let me know. I'd be interested. Because I knew that it would be soul-destroying for me, having come from a creative background, to work in a bank or a law firm or whatever. And a couple of weeks later, she came back to me and she said, oh, we've got this job. It's temporary to permanent as a marketing consultant at a design agency called The Partners. The UK's #1 creative design agency.
Wow.
Now, The Partners actually kind of rolled into Super Union now. But at the time, and I said, yes, okay, fine, that sounds great. And I was lucky enough to join at a time when they were going through phenomenal growth. And my boss was the new business director, and he was so busy with the incoming new business inquiries that he didn't have any time for all of the incoming press inquiries and all the softer reputational building inquiries that were coming in. And I kind of said to him, oh, well, this PR thing, I think I could do it. And he said, okay, go ahead.
Fantastic. I love that.
And so that's kind of how I got my start, really, with sort of PR and finding my way. And the way I kind of look at it is, and I found that I actually had a real knack for writing. I kind of look at it as a bit of a yin-yang thing. My first career was all about nonverbal communication. Now the second part of my life and career is all about verbal communication. Fast forward, I spent 5 very happy years at the Partners, and then I moved on to Landor Associates. That's where I found that not only did I have a knack for writing, but that I had a knack for writing awards entries. So whilst the Partners did a lot of awards entries, most of them were in the creative award schemes. And I did write the entries for that, but they're less important, and we'll talk about that later. Or, sorry, the writing of the entries is less important. But I started writing lots of design effectiveness awards entries and marketing effectiveness entries when I was at Landor. And I found that I not only had this aptitude for making the complex simple in terms of telling the brand story or the design story, but that I'm really good and really enjoy number crunching.
Yes.
I really...
Isn't it funny when you suddenly find out that you really have a knack for things like that?
Yeah. And then, so like, I really enjoy looking at spreadsheets and trying to figure out how all the data sort of makes for a good story. So that's kind of where I learned that I had the awards knack. Then sort of fast forward again by about 8 or 9 years, and I was working for another agency and sadly was made redundant. It was 2008 and it was the last recession, and I was a board level marketing position that I was made redundant from by that stage, and I thought about what my options were. I could take an adult gap year off and explore the world, but I'd kind of already explored the world, so I didn't really want to do that. I could try to find a permanent full-time board level position in marketing somewhere else, but it was pretty unlikely that I would get a role in-house because I was a non-billable resource during a recession. Or I could try to do something on my own. And so that's what I did. And I always knew that my business, so to speak, would be sort of a split between working with anywhere between 2 to 4 retained clients where I kind of provided all kinds of different marketing services. And then a whole bunch of ad hoc clients that I would do awards for. And I always knew that I didn't want to specialize just in awards because the nature of awards is that they're cyclical and I'm only one person. So, you know, it would be, you know, working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 6 months of the year and then doing nothing.
Yeah, it's a bit like a freelancer that only does annual reports.
Correct. Correct. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Wow. I love the fact that you came to this industry from somewhere completely different, because I'm sitting here, obviously we're in the studio, Izzy came to, our lovely producer here, came to agency marketing from a theatrical agent background. And I started out selling advertising space in magazines and came to new business that way. So none of us in the room here have had the traditional route into the industry. So thinking about awards in particular, and I touched earlier on, you know, the conversation that we'd had with Tony Walford about when he's working with acquirers looking to acquire agencies and them using awards as a measure of the agency's quality. But we know that there are lots of benefits to awards. I just wanted to get your take on that in terms of what you see for the clients that you work with and the awards that they win, what you see as the benefits to them as an agency.
Okay, so before I launch into the benefits, I have one gigantic proviso in huge capital letters.
Lovely.
Which is, like press relations, winning awards is only as good as what you do with it after you win. Because you have to assume that 90% of the people that you want to see your awards win or hear about your awards win will not unless you actually tell them about it. So that's my big proviso. And if you are not prepared to actually do something with the awards win, then there's very little point in spending a lot of time and money entering awards. Having said that, I think that there are various pros or benefits to winning awards, and we're talking about winning them, obviously. Obviously, there's a massive part of it is your talent retention and recruitment. Another aspect of it is it serves as another bunch of information to use to service your business development and marketing pipeline. It's a validation or third-party endorsement of that the work that you do works. You know, you can say as much as you like that the work that you do works, but if you've won awards for it, then that's the proof point. It also builds existing client relationships. But also, a lot of people say, and I say it too, that one of the biggest jobs for an agency is to make their clients look good. And awards make their clients look good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess your point about helping reinforce that client-agency relationship often, and we'll come on to some of the particular types of awards, but certainly for a number of them, the process of putting an award together requires a lot of client involvement.
Yes.
And so that process of going through that together is a really positive thing, particularly when there's a winner at the end.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then I think a more softer thing is that there's a general reputation building aspect to it that hopefully will fit in with the agency's positioning or special difference or what they're trying to say about themselves in the wider communications landscape.
Yeah. Okay. Now, we've talked about this before, but certainly over the last few years, there seem to be more and more and more award schemes popping up everywhere. And for agencies looking at those kind of calendars, and I mean, there are several kind of calendars that come out every year. I know in particular Future Factory do a calendar that they publish every year with all of the entry deadlines, which is a useful resource. How on earth should an agency start to kind of prioritise?
So there is, again, there's a little proviso here because it's not only the number of awards that are out there, but they can be very expensive, both in terms of time and money. Often there's a lot of judging politics going on around certain awards. Yeah. And so with the best laid intentions, your agency may never actually win in a particular award scheme simply because of the politics that go on. I will say it like it is because they all say that there isn't, but it exists. Yeah. And also there's also the risk that, you're setting yourself up potentially for failure because, if you G up all your people and your clients that you're entering these awards, obviously you must feel that they have something about them that they could win. Yeah. And then if you don't end up winning anything, then you're clearly creating a certain level of disappointment in all of these people's eyes.
I can remember nearly 20 years ago working for an agency, and we had entered into D&AD in a particular category. And we'd had the call saying, you really should think about getting a table. And we had a little bit of a tip-off, and we ended up getting a table for the entire agency. And we went along and we sat there, everybody, the whole agency, at a table. It was a small agency. And when that particular category was read out, they read out the nominees and said, no award in this category, and moved on.
Well,
and I think that happens a lot.
I was recently, I'm not going to say which award scheme it is, but a couple of years ago, I helped an agency with an entry for an award, and I wasn't actually there at the ceremony, but there were 11 pieces of work shortlisted into this particular category. 11 pieces shortlisted, which it was like obviously the most subscribed category. So you would think 11 pieces of work were worthy of being nominated. Yeah. Nothing won. Wow. And in fact, apparently, the people in the audience booed profusely for 5 minutes when it was announced that nothing had won.
And how can you even have a short list of 11 anyway? That's not a short list.
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on how many entries they got. Maybe they got 1,000 entries, so a short list of 11, maybe that's 10%. So it was unbelievable, and I went on to have a conversation with the award scheme to say, do you not see that in people's minds what this looks like is that you're just trying to get bums on seats to pay for very expensive places at the award ceremony? And that it doesn't look, and that's all that it looks like. And they had no idea that they were, they sort of gave me the spiel that, the judges are the judges, and, they are not given any kind of direction, and that, if they feel that then nothing is award winning worthy, then they won't hand out an award. But, there are awards like that. And so actually coming back to your original question about how do you prioritize. So I have a very long list here.
Great. We love a list.
So the first thing, I think, is be very clear about what your messaging is as an agency.
Yes.
What do you stand for as an agency? Because if you don't know what you stand for as an agency, you have no cut through to deciding which awards to enter.
Yeah.
So let me give you 2 examples.
Perfect.
The partners, which I mentioned before, obviously no longer in existence, but as a different entity now. So when I joined them in the 90s, they were the UK's #1 creative design agency. And they were able to call themselves that because they had won more creative awards than any other agencies in the UK. And so in order to preserve and protect and build on that reputation, they only entered creative awards. They had no interest in entering the effectiveness side of things because they capitalized on being the UK's #1 creative design agency. Slightly different is Elmwood, for example, the agency Elmwood, who have won many, I think they top the league table for design effectiveness. Now, I'm not sure, and I didn't check before we decided to have our discussion today, but a few years ago, I know that they set a stake in the ground that they wanted to be the UK's most creative and effective agency. Not just the most effective, creative and effective. And in fact, they managed to do that by, obviously, they enter effectiveness awards and creative awards, and they have won more of both than anybody else, and therefore they can justifiably claim that they are the UK's most creative and effective design agency. I don't know whether that's still the case, but understanding what they wanted to be allowed them to decide what sorts of awards to enter. So that's the point that I want to make about knowing your positioning. Another thing is obviously, what are your business objectives? Who is your target audience? Do you have objectives in terms of recruitment and retention of creatives? If so, then it probably makes sense to think about a little bit more about creative awards and what creative awards you might want to enter. If it's all about client development and new business development, or expansion into new regions, then you might want to be considering the effectiveness type awards. I often say this to people when I talk to them about awards, which is, when was the last time you had a prospective client ask you to prove how creative you are? And when was the last time that a prospective client asked you to prove the effectiveness of the work that you did? Now, I would hesitate to say, I have never personally heard any agency say,
that line of questioning.
Get the first line of questioning, which is prove how creative you are. Basically, in a client's mind, the fact that you exist as a creative agency means that you are creative. You don't need to prove that you are creative to them. However, they have a job to prove the effectiveness of their marketing channel, whatever that might be, and therefore they will often ask you to prove the effectiveness of your work. So if you have ambitious new business targets, then you might want to be considering more towards the effectiveness side of things than the creative side of things. Which moves very neatly into the types of awards that there are. So we can slice and dice them in many different ways. So we talked about the creative award schemes, which are the ones that are judged basically. Usually the judges are creative directors from the agency world, and maybe a very small proportion might be in-house creative directors from brands that have in-house creative teams. And those are judged almost entirely on the strength of the creative idea and its execution. 100%. Then you have what are called the effectiveness awards. Those are a bit of a continuum. So there are sort of the big daddy of the design effectiveness awards, the DBA design effectiveness awards, which are pretty much judged 100% on effectiveness. It has nothing to do with what the design looks like, and everything to do with how effective it was. Now that's all the way on one end of the continuum. And then there are other award schemes that are, I guess, Transform Awards Europe is a good example, that kind of take into consideration the creative as well as the impact measures. And there's kind of a continuum all the way through in that world. Then you also have what I call sort of the business impact awards. So, maybe you're a company that is, if you're growing, so it's not about your client's work. You want to sort of shout loudly about the fact that, you've trebled in size in the last 6 months and, opened up offices in 6 new regions in the world and things like that. Then there are actually business type awards that you can enter.
So these might be like the Agency of the Year awards, or where they might
they might be,
at...
or they might even be things like the Chamber of Commerce awards,
Yeah.
or things like that.
Yeah.
They're more they tend to be less coming from the agency world and
Yes,
more coming from the business world. There's some SME type awards as well, the Real Business Awards, I think they're called. I might be wrong. I think they actually rebranded this year, but I can't remember what they've rebranded to.
And of course, there's the Best Companies to Work For type awards too.
Yes, that's slightly different, but yes. Then there are also the sort of category or sector-based awards. So if from a business development perspective, you are trying to, or maybe you're trying to position your agency as the financial services sector experts, then you might want to be looking at the World of Financial Services Awards, because there are many awards, for example, in financial services, which have categories that relate to design and communications and all sorts of other things within them. So that's one way of slicing and dicing the types of awards. Another way of slicing and dicing the awards is by the award's reputation. So here I am sitting with mostly women in the room.
Yes, indeed.
But I often have conversations with men, and it's not to say I'm not trying to be sexist, but I do use a football analogy for this. Firstly, you have what I call the Premier League Awards.
Yep.
So these are the awards that have been around for more than 10 years. More often than not, they're run by a trade or industry body. They're not profit making.
Yep.
Really. The positives about the Premier League ones, obviously, is that they have the highest of reputations.
Yeah.
But of course, because they have the highest of reputations, often they're much more expensive to enter in terms of the entry fees. B, they have many more entries.
Yeah, so more competitive.
So it's more competitive, so they're harder to win. And thirdly, the judging tends to be much more rigorous, so it makes them even harder to win. So those are the Premier League ones.
Yeah.
Then you have what I call the Division 1 awards. These are the ones that have probably been around for 5 to 10 years. They often are brought to you by trade industry publication of some kind. Yep. And they have quite a good reputation, but they also, if you do win and you win well, obviously there's an immediate PR channel for you, because they will publicize within their publications. They tend to be a little bit less expensive. They tend to be judged a little less rigorously. So they're overall a little bit easier to win. So I guess if you're looking for some quick hits, maybe if you're embarking on, winning awards, that awards journey, and you want to make some quick hits, maybe you need to think about entering some Division 1s and not just focusing on the Premier League.
Good advice.
So, for example, like in the creative awards world, I would say that the D&ADs and the Cannes Lions of this world and the Design Week awards of this world are Premier League, super difficult to win.
Yeah.
I was reading the other day that Cannes Lions this year had 31,000 entries and 1,000 winners. So
31,000
entries overall. Overall, I mean, across all
all categories.
All buckets of types of lions that they hand out. 1,000 winners. Not particularly good odds.
No.
No. I'm not a betting woman, but even if I was, I don't think I would bet on that.
No.
So, think about how you want to split your Division 1 versus Premier League. Then there is one final division, the Sunday Leagues awards. These are awards. This is kind of everything else.
Okay.
And these are the awards that you should never enter.
Oh, right. Okay.
These are the awards that are basically in it only to make money, and they don't care.
And which ones are they?
Well, I don't like to say
no, not
which
specifically,
ones are they,
but how can we identify them?
How to recognize them. Very often they will ask you to pay before they will even give you the entry form.
Right.
Or to pay before you actually go through the entry process.
Okay, that's a red flag.
That's a red flag. Very often they will ask judges to pay to be a judge.
Right.
That's a red flag.
Okay.
Very often they will ask you, in addition to your entry fees, that should you win, you need to pay for a winner's package of anywhere often between £1,000 to £5,000.
Red flag.
That's a red flag. Those are the main red flags for me. Maybe they've only been, who they are brought to you by. So if they are brought to you by an organization that is only about awards and not a more well-rounded publishing company, then that's another red flag.
Yeah. I might just touch, though, on the payment to be a judge, only because that's normally something that I would have run a million miles from. However, I had a client last year who had a particular piece of work, and we were looking for where they might be able to enter it. But at the time that we were looking at award schemes, the dates didn't quite work out. It hadn't been in market for long enough. So I was just doing a bit of research, and I found an award scheme which was very much a kind of a sector. It was a financial services award scheme, and you could apply to be a judge, and there was a small fee. And we ended up actually doing it because, as well as having an objective to put awards in their plan, I'd also given them an objective to do more judging.
Yes.
So we did it just as a bit of a let's just try it and see. And my client came back and he said, you know what? He said, that was the best 2 days networking I have ever done, because all of the other judges were senior clients. And I think he was only one of 2 agency people there. And he said, I wouldn't, for the small amount of money, because it was only a nominal fee, for the small amount of money he paid to be a judge, he said, I would never have had access to those people in an environment where actually we were there as peers. So,
yes.
So again, it's a different objective.
I think I would agree with you 100%. If the objective is for networking and things like that, then absolutely it's...
But if it says an award entry, then it's slightly,
Exactly. So another way of prioritizing is to do your research. Look at past winners of any particular award scheme.
Yes.
Most awards, particularly the creative awards, will have a particular aesthetic to them. I don't know. For example, Creative Review, the annual, has a particular, the magazine itself has a particular creative aesthetic, I think, quite edgy. And so I have a couple of clients, for example, who they do not do edgy creative work. They do amazingly creative work, but it's not on the edgy, funky, cool side of things, if that makes sense.
Fit that kind of profile.
Exactly. And so, we've all agreed that they will never enter those because they don't have a chance of ever winning, because they just don't fit into the aesthetic. So that's sort of a way that you can self-edit in terms of what awards you want to win. Also look at the past judges. Are they people from companies that you admire? Chances are that they will share a similar point of view or aesthetic to you. Look at the judging process and the judging criteria. And, can you fulfill all of the judging criteria? If you can't, then,
Save your time and money.
Save your time and money. Look at what's needed as well. Honestly, there are some awards that I swear to God you need a master's degree to unravel all of the content that is required. And when I say content, normally awards will require both visual and verbal content, sometimes masses of it, and sometimes that require a huge amount of time and energy, and quite frankly, may not be the best use of the resources that you have at any given time. And if the choice is between putting resource towards an actual new business pitch, or putting the resource towards creating a film case study of the work for the Cannes Lions, I know which I would choose.
Exactly.
So there's that. Also, client permission and willingness to help. So client permission, I've heard horror stories where agencies, luckily none of my clients, because I do ask them to get their clients okay before they enter anything, but I have heard horror stories where agencies have entered work, and it's been a real problem because particularly some really big global businesses have quite serious contracts that you sign with them that don't allow you to actually promote the work that you do for them in any way, including awards. Now, on the conversely, I have one client, an agency that works with a particular brand, and this particular brand will not let them do any kind of profile raising activities related to the brand except award entries. So the award entries are kind of the back door for them to be able, so winning awards, once they've won the awards, they can then publicize it because it's about an awards win, right?
Clever.
So client permission and also willingness to help. So probably not such a big deal if it's creative awards that you're looking at, but a really big deal if it's effectiveness awards that you're looking at. The other thing that I always recommend is to think about what categories to enter.
Yes, because quite often there's a piece of work that will be relevant for a number of categories.
Correct. And quite often there are categories that might be a little bit undersubscribed compared to others.
Yes, yes.
So I also suggest that people, you need to be really ruthless when you're self-selecting which work to enter. You need to be really, really ruthless. When it comes to creative awards, I would say, creative directors, leave your egos at the door, really think about, really look at what's won before, as I said earlier, and choose a couple of pieces of work. If you look at the agencies that win lots of creative awards, you'll see that they're not winning lots of creative awards for lots of different pieces of work each year. They're just entering the same work into many different awards, and they're winning awards for that piece over and over again. And then suddenly it's a buzz in people's minds, that piece of work keeps winning things, and
it starts to get some traction.
It starts to get some traction, even without doing any marketing about it.
So do you, as part of your consulting with agencies, do you help them go through that process of advising them on, actually, I think if we look at this category, we might get a bit more cut through, and then another category. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I help people however they need help, really. So I can help them all the way through to, I have a master database with hundreds of award schemes on them with all of the details of when they open for entry and the fees and the criteria and all of the information about them. So I can create an awards calendar for you, which, is a one-off investment because it tends to repeat every year after that. All the way through to things like helping to define what your award strategy should be as it is linked into what your special difference is and what your objectives are as a business, and all the way down to the pointier things like writing the awards entries and giving advice on which categories I think you should be entering.
Fantastic.
And then a final thing is timing. So will the studio have resource, or will you have resource in your studio and within your team to enter any particular award? For example, one of my clients does a lot of work in experiential event stuff. So, the work that they do is based on events that happen at particular times of the year. So they know that they're going to be very busy from February to April each year, and then from June to October each year, and then they have slower times. So honestly, I say to them, there is no point in even considering any awards where the open for entry period is during your busy time, because you're just not going to be able to fulfill.
I'm interested in, apart from prioritisation, I'm interested in the experience over the years of working with agencies, specifically on awards, of the most common mistakes that you've seen.
So the number one mistake is that they don't plan.
Yes. I thought it might be that.
And so what they end up doing is they end up lurching from one thing to the next because somebody somewhere saw that the deadline for so-and-so award scheme is in a week's time.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe we should think about entering it.
Yeah. We've all been there.
And it makes sense. I mean, I get it. I totally get it. But it will forever be that way if you don't plan, if you don't identify what are the key awards.
Okay, so
that's
rule
the
number one, planning. Okay, what's the second thing?
So I guess this is linked to the planning, but think about the work that you've done over the past year. Most awards have a criteria that say that you need to, the work needs to have launched within the past year, and it could be the calendar year, January to December, or it could be something else depending on when the awards open for entry. But think about what you've done in the past year, what could be an awards contender, and then create this calendar of possible awards and categories that you could consider.
Okay, so the opposite question to the mistakes. Tell us what makes an award-winning entry.
Okay, so each one is slightly different.
Okay.
Creative awards. Basically, this is all about what the visual assets look like. And the entry has to hit the judges between the eyes, knock them out, and make them think, I wish I had thought of that.
Yes, that's a good way to think about it.
Yes. And interestingly, it's not the work. So it's often, for some of the bigger Premier League schemes like Cannes Lions and D&AD Awards, it's how you present that work as well as what the work looks like, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
So, I don't know. I mean, I've done exercises in past years where I've looked at, the proportion of, for example, design agencies to advertising agencies that win in the design categories at things like D&AD and Cannes Lions. And the vast majority, I would say, in the past, I haven't done it this year, but in past years, at least 75% of winners of design categories in D&AD and Cannes Lions are actually advertising agencies.
Because of their packaging.
Because they can create all kinds of whiz-bangy video, case study, amazing, package it up sort of things. Yeah. And they, the ad agencies, they've got big marketing teams. Yeah. A packaging design agency hasn't got that.
So they create a campaign for that award entry.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And then with the copy for creative awards, that's really don't spend too much time on it. Honestly, it's kind of, I mean, if you imagine the average judge at D&AD Awards has hundreds, if not thousands, of entries to look at. There is no way that they are going to read 250 to 500 words for each one of those entries. The only time that they actually read the entries is if they're on the fence about something. Yeah. So that's creative awards. I mean, those are sort of the things that I would say will help to make a winning entry. Effectiveness awards. Content is king for these, for the most part. But do keep it simple and brief because, so I've been a judge for a couple of effectiveness awards, and it's hard going because, they do give you a lot of time, but still, you've got to read, 1,200 to 2,000 words of copy for like 30 to 40 entries,
From a diverse range of businesses and challenges. Yeah.
And you really need to read it and think about it. So even though awards will give you the word count or whatever, I would say try to stick to sort of less than what they suggest as the maximum word count, because the judges, you just start, as much as you would love to be able to stage it out and do 5 entries today and 5 tomorrow over the course of a week, it just doesn't happen that way, and you just sit down for like 3 or 4 hours and sort of bash through them all.
And I guess this is the really interesting thing for me, is that this is where the benefit of having an external consultant to help you with award entries really comes in, because in my experience, even with case studies, when agencies have been, particularly if it's take brand identity for as an example, thinking of brand identity project, that might have been a year they've been working on that project, and they become so involved in it that by the time they come to write the case study, they can't step far enough back to be able to talk about it in a way that is really clear and makes sense to somebody who isn't involved with the project.
Correct. And often they just get stuck in the minutiae rather than looking at sort of what are the big picture. And that leads in very nicely into, when you're writing these effectiveness case studies, the most important thing is that, you have results versus objectives and versus context. And everything needs to be contextualized. And you need to establish a causal link between the entry and the results. Yeah. And usually, when it comes to contextualizing things, that's about one or more of the following. So it could be targets, so proof that you met or surpassed targets. It could be year-on-year, like-for-like improvement. So again, you're contextualizing it. It could be that better performance than your competitors. It could be better performance than the market or industry averages. The more types of context that you have, so I've listed 4 here, the more you go up the pecking order, that makes the difference between sort of a bronze and a gold, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Then also it's the scale of the effect, which is super, super important. So, for example, a large sales uplift in a growing market is less impressive than a small sales uplift in a declining or stagnant market.
Yes.
Right. So another aspect of what makes a winning effectiveness award entry is making sure that you have clarity of results and evidence, tangible evidence of what results were achieved. So anecdotal evidence is nice to have, but it ain't going to win you anything.
Okay.
Leading on to that, use facts, not assumptions. And finally, with effectiveness awards, we talked about the context stuff. You need to contextualize the results, but also you need to make sure that there is nothing else that might have had the impact. So I said earlier that you have to establish a causal link. So, for example, if you have a global consumer food brand that had a multi-million advertising push at the same time that the new packaging design came out, you will find it very difficult to isolate the impact of the packaging design from the rest of the marketing mix.
Absolutely. I'm wondering then, I mean, there's a lot of advice here that we've got based on all of your years of experience. I'm wondering what your top 3 tips would be for agencies if they're just thinking, right, we need to up our awards game and make sure that we're getting a better return on our investment, that we're getting some wins. What would be your top 3 tips?
Well, if it's okay with you, I've got 2 tips and then some advice.
Brilliant. We love that.
So the first tip is leave the egos at the door and be ruthless about what you choose to enter. It's better to enter less work that's really winnable into as many awards as possible than to spread yourselves too thin trying to enter lots and lots of different types of work in any given year.
Perfect.
Second tip is don't bother to enter if it's a week to go until the deadline. And then the third is more advice on what to do after you've won something. So as I said at the very beginning, it's only, the proviso was it's only as good as how you merchandise the win after you've won. And don't forget to reward and recognize the individuals in the team publicly as well.
Yeah, that's really important because it's and you're quite right about the team as well, because it's never ever one person, is it? It's a whole team that makes the piece of work award worthy, not just the creative.
Correct.
The whole team.
Yes.
Fantastic. I'm interested to know which book you would recommend to our listeners.
I've chosen A Smile in the Mind by David Stewart and Beryl McAlone. I chose it for 2 reasons. Okay. Firstly, because I was actually at the partners when they were writing the book, and I actually had a role in researching content and getting permission from all of the various people in the book, but also because it's really a fabulous coffee table book, and it always makes me remember that marketing and communications and design should never be taken too seriously.
Fantastic. Well, our listeners will be delighted with that, because we will, of course, give away a copy of A Smile in the Mind to one of our lucky listeners. You know what to do. Just join in the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag #SmallSparkTheory at Gunpowder Tweets, and we will pick a winner, and you'll get a copy of Smile in the Mind. Steph, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Somebody, another consultant who I have great respect for, told me, this is when I started out 10 years ago, if you want to be a consultant, then really be a consultant. Tell it like it is, and the companies that value that will be the ones with whom you enjoy working the most.
Oh, great advice. Great advice. Thank you so much for all of your insight. You've been fantastic.
My pleasure.
You have been listening to Small Spark Theory, brought to you by Gunpowder Consulting. Join in the conversation on Twitter at Gunpowder Tweets using the hashtag #SmallSparkTheory. This podcast is created and hosted by me, Lucy Mann, and edited and produced by Isabel Jarvis. Music is provided by JukeDeck, available at jukedeck.com. If you'd like to find out more about our online mentored new business courses, visit smallsparktheory.com, or for information about our consulting, visit gunpowderconsulting.com. And if you enjoyed today's episode, head to iTunes and leave us a star. This episode was recorded at the Pod at White City Place.